Welcome everyone. My name is Becky Rares and I'll be moderating this session, the Sakai Gradebook, What's New and Coming Soon. Before we begin, let's make sure we know the rules. The session's being recorded and you'll receive an email announcement once the recordings are available. If you have questions or comments, please type them into the chat area at the right, or if you have a mic, please feel free to ask questions, but please mute yourself if you're not speaking to avoid extra noise. So let's begin. Today, our presenters for this session are Kyle Blythe and Peyton Giles. And Kyle is a business analyst at New York University, and he works with project teams, he gathers requirements, and he also provides functional expertise. He provides technical support, guidance, and training to faculty and staff at NYU. And Peyton Giles started his life off as a software developer supporting the Australian government, and he currently works as a freelancer and contributes to open source projects such as Sakai and Archive Space. Please welcome Kyle and Peyton.
Great, thanks Becky. Okay, cool. So thank you everyone for joining today. This presentation is going to have quite a few graphics in it. So I've uploaded the presentation in the middle there. If you want to be able to see things in full detail, you might want to try and expand out that part of the screen a little bit so you can see things a little better. Because we're going to be talking about some great functionality here today. Okay, so I'd like to start by talking briefly about community projects. The Gradebook project was one of a number of projects that implemented a new community source funding approach called FARM, or Funding and Resource Management. This approach, in which institutions and commercial affiliates collaborate and provide financial backing for a project, has proven to be pretty successful, and we're really glad to see this workflow taking off. With phase 1 development of the new Gradebook now behind us, we'd really like to thank our partners in the project, particularly Notre Dame, for their ongoing involvement with the Gradebook and the additional contributions to the tool that they're making, which we'll talk about in a bit. Before diving into the sort of latest features and upcoming enhancements, I just want to touch on the methodology behind this project. So from the start, we wanted to base this new tool on the very robust framework already available in the previous Gradebook tool, while making as few back-end changes as possible. This approach ensured that the new Gradebook would tie into existing Sakai tools without the need for new code. It would also ensure that the new tool would be fully compatible with existing Gradebook data. To make that happen, and to ensure that the new tool would be feature complete for Sakai 11, we kept ourselves limited to a well-defined scope. So we focused on the Gradebook 1 tool and spent a great deal of time ensuring that we could either map or translate all the existing tools' functionality to a new spreadsheet-style interface while providing a clean and consistent user experience. So to achieve this, we also kept things simple. When it came to interactions and design, we looked to other LMS grading applications, as well as traditional spreadsheet applications like Excel, Google Sheets, etc. We didn't try to reinvent the wheel here because ultimately, all these other platforms and products have invested a great deal of time and money into their user experiences, and we can benefit from their knowledge. Also, this competitive analysis ensured that we were delivering workflows that were ultimately intuitive and familiar for our users. Everyone who has ever used a spreadsheet application can figure out pretty intuitively how to navigate and enter grades in the new Gradebook. So in addition to this analysis, we also focused heavily on user research and usability testing from the start. Beginning with paper prototypes, we placed the tool in front of users to gauge what worked versus what didn't, and adjusted designs and workflows accordingly. Doing this from the very beginning kept us agile and prevented us from being locked into approaches or designs that wouldn't work for users. We also placed a heavy emphasis on accessibility and got input from Sakai developers very early on to ensure that we, wanted to implement what was possible. So why mention kind of all of this right now? Well, because due to the defined scope of Gradebook NG in 11.0, there were a number of features that simply just couldn't get implemented without expanding the scope. We received requests from a number of Gradebook 2 users that, unfortunately, we just couldn't fulfill for this initial release. Looking to the future, though, well, consider that a teaser for later on in this presentation. But first, let's talk briefly about what's new in Sakai 11.2. So for this release, we strive to provide some additional final polish to the current iteration of the tool, and we were able to identify and resolve about 22 bugs. We also took this opportunity to provide a couple of enhancements to the tool, which we can cover briefly here. These include, first, a couple of additions to the import-export process. One of our top requirements for the new gradebook in 11.0 was to simplify and consolidate the import-export process. In Gradebook 1, this process was broken up into two different workflows. So we sought to kind of create a single intuitive import process that would scan the contents of an imported spreadsheet, let you know what was new or had been updated, and allow you to then to sort of selectively import scores and then create new gradebook items if necessary. So for 11.2, we wanted to further refine this process to make it as simple and straightforward as possible. So with that in mind, we simplified the formatting for the comments column in the export CSV file, which is going to make it easier for users to be able to create new items with new comments columns, then import those into the system. We also cleaned up the styling on the import selection screen and added a new filter toggle for new and updated content. So first, let's talk about comments in the exported CSV file. Here we can see that comments, which were previously marked with sort of framing asterisks and slashes that would appear on both sides of the comments title, have been pretty dramatically simplified. Now it's just a simple asterisk preceding the item's title. So this formatting is reserved exclusively for comments. If an asterisk is entered into the item creation screen within the Gradebook interface, the system prevents you from creating that item, informing you that the asterisk is reserved exclusively for comments columns. Additionally, for the purpose of internationalization in different languages, the first two columns in the spreadsheet now are always reserved for the student ID and the student name. Lastly, while we can see the total points here in brackets, if we decide to create a new item without these brackets, you would still be able to proceed with the import, choosing to provide the point total during the guided item creation process. Okay. So next, we cleaned up the import selection screen to provide additional clarity. While this selection process was already dramatically simplified in 11.0, comments were appearing in separate rows from their associated gradebook items. Considering the two are linked together, we wanted to help clarify this. So now items and comments appear in single grouped rows. You can kind of see that right here. Additionally, checkboxes only appear when new or updated content is present. That means that when you have an item with updated scores, but no updated comments, you will see only a single checkbox in the row, as is the case of well, midterm right here. Likewise, if you have updated comments with no updated scores, you'll just see that single checkbox for the comments. However, if you have an item that has both updated scores and updated comments, you will see two checkboxes, as in the case of homework 3 up here. With the status column on the right, I can see that both the item and its comments have updates. So I can then choose to import the scores, the comments, or both. So we think this really helps to clarify the status of content and the flexibility you have with importing. And to further simplify this screen, we also have incorporated a nice little filter toggle at the top of the screen, which you can select to only display new or updated content. So as you can see, if I select that, it will actually hide all of the content that has been identified as having no changes. And from here, I can focus exclusively on the content I want to import. So moving on though. Next, we added some minor styling updates for the student grade summary screens in the tool. This new summary view is pretty powerful, as it allows you to view a detailed breakdown of scores for each student, as well as preview the gradebook from a given student's perspective. For 11.2, we made it easier to see the visibility status of final course grades in the instructor view, and added fixed table headers, which allow you to maintain a sense of place with large gradebooks as you kind of scroll through a long list of items. You can now see a fixed header at the top there. So here, you can see that informative text will show when you have the course grade not visible to students, while some additional info at the bottom of the page informs you to go to settings to release the final course grade to students. Also, that header row right here is fixed. So if I were to scroll through this list of items here, I wouldn't lose my sense of place in the window. Okay, next. So we have a few minor enhancements to the table, and with this new spreadsheet interface, we wanted to provide as much information as possible within the table without being too obtrusive. So one of the ways we did this was by providing color-coded icons in cell to denote when there's a comment, when an error has occurred, when there's an item originating from an external tool like assignments or tests and quizzes, and when a score is providing extra credit to a student. One scenario that was not accounted for in 11.0, though, was when a score is in excess of the item's total points, but was also being applied to the tool from an external tool. So you would see the lock icons noting that it was coming from somewhere else, but you wouldn't get the handy yellow plus icon letting you know that that was the student receiving extra credit for that score. So for 11.2, we've added a new combo icon that shows both the lock and the extra credit plus in the cell. So here we can see the combo icon, and when I click on it, I get an informative popover that provides both information about the external item status and the extra credit. Okay, so that's what's new in 11.2. We're going to dedicate the rest of the presentation, though, to talking about what features and functionality are on the horizon for the gradebook. So first off, I'd like to talk about some very exciting and much anticipated functionality coming soon to the system. As a result of another community farm initiative, a dedicated rubric service is being developed for Sakai. So the service is going to allow for the creation of both individual one-off rubrics, as well as rubric templates that can be shared between different sites and even applied within different tools in Sakai, such as the gradebook and assignments. So a great deal of emphasis is being placed on the user experience with these rubrics, as we want to be able to provide a very flexible and powerful framework without compromising the ease of use for end users. So with that in mind, the rubrics UI will be straightforward and intuitive, allowing for instructors and administrators to create or edit rubrics using very familiar workflows. So as far as the status of this project goes, though, the framework, the actual rubric service, is currently in development. Unicon is taking on this work, and we're really excited for what they're producing. This means, though, that the gradebook integration with the service is going to happen after the completion of the service itself. So I'd like to share some initial mock-ups of how rubrics might work within the gradebook, but you can keep in mind that the design is sort of still in progress and subject to change. So here we have the item creation screen in the gradebook. The way we've envisioned a rubric service integration would work, though, is that a graded rubric would be its own unique type of gradebook item. So you could choose to have either a traditional points-based gradebook item, which would continue to be graded in cell like a traditional spreadsheet, and you would also have rubric items, which would be graded, well, in a rubric. The main reason for this is to ensure that when you're using a rubric, the total points for the gradebook item matches the total points for the rubric itself. This eliminates any confusion around total points, since the whole point of a rubric is to qualify the score that a student receives through the use of criteria. So when you're grading a rubric item, you're scoring the student on the rubric's ratings, which cumulatively add up to the total points for this gradebook item. So here, you can see that we have a new grading type right here. And this drop down here allows me to change it from traditional points-based to a rubric-based item. I would then get some options that would show up below here. I could choose to import previously saved rubric from the gradebook service, which I could then edit, or I could select the option to create a new rubric from scratch. So if I were to choose that option, I would then have a single sample criterion that I could then edit. I would have the option of adding additional criteria below. By default, each criterion would have 2 or 3 default rankings, which I could easily modify in line. So let's pretend I'm adding a second criterion by clicking the Add Criterion button here. Okay, and now I have 3, oh, sorry. So you can see I kind of have here, I'm clicking between no points and full points in this image here. So let's pretend I've added an additional ranking in here as well. Okay, and now I have 3 rankings for my first criterion, which I've renamed to clarity of expression. If I added a point value for a given criterion, the point values would be evenly distributed across the number of rankings. So for example, with 3 rankings, I'd have 0, 5, and 10. If I had 4 rankings, it would be 0, 3, 7, 10, etc. So I could then choose to save the rubric as a template or go ahead and just create it. So let's say I just click Create. And now we'd have a new rubric-based gradebook item represented here by homework 4. If I wanted to grade a student for homework 4, I would just click into the cell like I would for any other gradebook item. However, instead of then entering a score in cell, a Lightbox window would open containing the rubric. I see all of my different criteria and can start grading the student from here. I just click on the rankings that I want to apply, and voila. I can see that the item score is updating automatically here at the bottom. I could also add comments to the student for individual criteria here on the right, or provide high-level feedback to the student using the student feedback field. I could even choose to override the final score below if there were some sort of extenuating circumstances maybe not covered by the criteria rankings. And then when I click on record score, the score appears in the cell for that student right here. Any high-level feedback I'd apply in the student feedback field would appear with the comment bubble icon, and I could view the comment from there. Okay, so that's how we have initially envisioned rubrics within the gradebook. Again, keep in mind that these designs are still kind of preliminary, but that the rubric service framework is going to encompass much more than just the gradebook. We're really excited about the work that Unicon is doing for this, though. So stay tuned over the coming months for additional information on the rubric service. All right, so next, I'd like to talk about another enhancement, the option for item level weighting. So remember earlier when I was mentioning the scope for phase 1, item level weighting was a request that we'd received from previous Gradebook 2 users, and it's a really useful option for further customizing the weighting in your gradebook. However, to prevent scope creep, we decided to kind of limit ourselves to existing Gradebook 1 functionality for phase 1. Looking to the future, though, we are really excited to be able to bring in additional functionality like this additional weighting while paying special attention to usability and consistency within the tool. So item level weighting in Gradebook 2 applies to items within graded categories. You can, of course, have different categories that are worth different percentages of the final course grade. So for example, I could have like homework that's being worth 20% of the final course grade. But what about the items within those categories? By default, these item weights are based off of the item's total point values. So if you have 3 items that are each worth like 100 points, they're going to all end up equaling 33.3% of that category's weighted percentage. And if those point values are different, the item weights change accordingly. So that's the point-based weighting that's by default within Gradebook 2 and Gradebook 1. Gradebook 2, however, provides some additional options. You can, for example, choose to have all items in a category weighted equally, regardless of their individual point totals. So you can have an item worth 50 points and one being worth 100, and they'd still get weighted the same within that category. You can also choose to assign custom weighting for the items in the category, again, separate from those total points. So as we look forward to adding this capability in the new gradebook, our primary concern is ensuring that the workflow and user experience for this falls in line with the rest of the tool, and that this additional functionality doesn't hinder any existing workflows. So with that in mind, I'd like to walk through some of the screenshots showing off how we envision this would work. Okay, so here we have the gradebook with weighted categories in place. When we add these categories, you'll note that there's already a dedicated column for the category's weighted total score right here. This, we feel, is the ideal place to provide additional points for managing the weighting within the category. What we envision is a dropdown similar to the other column header dropdowns right here, which, when selected, would provide the option to customize the item level weightings for this particular category. So if I click on this, it would open a Lightbox. Sorry if that's a little hard to see here, but this Lightbox would then allow you to be able to see and customize the item level weighting for a particular category. So we think it's important to be able to do this from within a single place for a given category. It allows you to be able to see all of your items at once. And would allow you to be able to make all of your individual weighting updates and confirm them before having to save. So here you can see the default, which is the weight item by total points. It will show the items within the category below, their total points next to it, and the current weighting that is being provided. Since the default is points-based, and these percentage fields would not be editable. So I could then change the item level weighting for this category to provide equal weighting if I wanted to, regardless of that point value, or I could select the custom item weights. So if I select that, you'll notice that the red total here is showing up at the bottom. So we would provide the same percentage validation that you get in settings when you create your weighted categories. So you have to provide a total of 100% in order to successfully save the item weighting. So how would this work when you sort of add a new gradebook item after you set up this weighting? Since the weighting is done on a single screen, if you had custom item weights in place, newly created gradebook items would have a default weight of 0. You would then have some sort of indication in the interface And you could then return to this window here to further customize the weighting. Okay, so that's our current version, our vision for item level weighting. We're excited to be able to bring this feature to the Gradebook soon, and hope that both Gradebook users, particularly those that use Gradebook 2, would find this feature useful. Before we continue, though, let me just sort of condense this a little bit to see if we have any questions or comments. Okay, so let's see here. Can you provide items with unique weights within a category, no matter how you're grading, points or percentages? Yes, so if you had percentage-based grading, you would have, I think you would still be able to provide percentage-based weighting within the individual category as well. Because basically, even when you're grading with percentages, you're still sort of grading with points in the background anyway. So I don't think that would be affected. Although if anyone has used Gradebook 2 and knows differently, please let me know. Okay, so you have a title bar that spans groups, grade items by category. Would it be worthwhile to have a second title bar that spans the category that visually displays the weight within the category? Would that be too confusing? It might be something that's useful. Yeah, we're trying to still play around with how this would be represented in the interface, whether it would be something that's just indicated in the individual item headers. So below the homework 1, maybe it would say its weight. But perhaps it would be useful to have a second row there. It just kind of depends. Right, it's right under, yeah, homework, display the weights. Okay, yeah, that might be a good way of being able to display this. We'll have to see what works best. And as with other features that we've implemented in the new Gradebook, we would do some usability testing to try and ensure that these features work well. Cool. Any other questions about anything that we've covered so far? Okay. Are other users having trouble with the print feature on grade summary? Can't print more than the first screen. So interesting. So I'm not sure I follow there. So when you print that, you can't print more than the first screen. So are there more screens in the grade summary that you want to be printing? All the students' grades. I see. Okay. Right now, so we were initially thinking of having a sort of print view for the entire spreadsheet, but that doesn't end up looking very nice. It doesn't look nice in Gradebook 1 either. What we do provide is the ability to export a CSV file, since all spreadsheet applications have their own sort of print function, be it Excel or Google Sheets or anything like that. So we figured for having an entire view of your gradebook, if you just exported the CSV file and then printed that you would get sort of better formatting than you might be able to get from Sakai. All the single students' grades, not just. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not sure I follow the because I think the grade summary screen shows all the items on a single page. You have to scroll. Oh, and it's not printing the scrolling. Interesting. Okay, that's something that we'll need to look into. Thank you so much for raising that. Yeah, we'll have to look into that print when you have scrolling in that screen. Okay. So does the new import allow you to import categories with items if instructor creates a spreadsheet and then uploads first? No, so currently categories do not show up in the export. That's something that you define when you're importing. So one thing you can do, though, is if you've created categories in your gradebook, you can go and create all of your gradebook items in a spreadsheet and then import it. And then the import process gives you sort of a guided setup process where you're able to edit each of the settings for all of your new gradebook items before you finalize the import. So we want to be able to provide sort of a one seamless workflow for the entire import process. So there's no way to import categories and create categories from a spreadsheet, but you do have the option of being able to set up your categories within the gradebook and then apply categories to your items as you import them. Is Gradebook NG compatible with iRubric? Our latest communication with iRubric that they are not ready to invest in the Gradebook NG application or integration. Okay, so yeah, at the moment, I don't believe that iRubric does integrate with Gradebook NG, But that is sort of the work that Unicon is doing right now on a native Rubrics service in Sakai, which ultimately we will be providing a gradebook integration for that, which we were showing off earlier, that you can sort of click into individual student cells and be able to bring up a rubric that you can then grade. Is it possible for students to calculate the potential course grade in advance based on the points they get so far? Yes, so that is, I think, just the way that the course grade actually works. So there's a running course grade for each student, and by default, the course grade is not visible to the students, although at any point, an instructor can go into the settings and choose to release the final course grade to students. So yes, it's definitely possible to calculate the potential course grade in advance based on the points you have so far. Okay, so we have some customizations in the classic gradebook to publish grades to Banner SIS. Would it be easy to port those mods to the Gradebook NG? I believe so. I'm not a developer, so I don't think I could really speak to it too much, but it is using the exact same framework as Gradebook Classic or Gradebook 1. So if you have some customizations in there to publish grades from Gradebook to SIS, you should be able to do that fairly easily with the new Gradebook as well. Peyton, are you on the call today?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Ah, there you are.
Hi. Yeah. Yeah, I guess we'll have to take a look at the code. But if you could have a look yourself and submit a pull request if you can figure it out. Or I guess it just depends where the code is. If it's in the service, then we can definitely use it. If it's in the Gradebook tool code, then I'm guessing we'd need to port it across. But it's just it's Java, so if yeah, there's no reason, there's nothing to say we can't bring it across.
Cool. Great, thank you. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few more bits of the presentation here, and then we can get a few more questions in. Okay, great. So one other feature that I'd like to highlight here, I'd like to give a big shout out to David Bauer and the University of Dayton, who are developing a really useful contribution to the Gradebook, which is a high-level reordering of Gradebook items and categories from a single kind of simple window. So while the Gradebook currently supports the reordering of items within the spreadsheet view via drag and drop of columns, there currently isn't a way to easily reorder large numbers of items or sort of drag items between different categories. So this new reordering window is going to provide a supplemental top-level view of the Gradebook, and you can then sort of see and reorder entire categories and individual items at once. So let's take a look here. So here we have a mock-up of this ordering window. So right now, my Gradebook is grouped by category. So when I open this sorting window, I will see my items grouped by category. And sort of similar to the way that it works with the student view, if my Gradebook was ungrouped, the ungrouped view would open by default. So the categories are color-coded to match the category colors in the spreadsheet view, and I can see all of the items inside of them. You can also see that I have a group by category button at the top here. So I could switch between the grouped and ungrouped view and save the orders for both right from this window. So if I unclick that group by category, I would see an ungrouped view. There would still be the category information, if applicable, and I would still get a nice color indication for the category on the left. So I'm going to return to the group by category view, though. Okay. So in addition to the category information, we can see whether items are not released to students or not included in course grade calculations, thanks to the little icons here. This design, by the way, aligns with the visibility of tools in the Site Info Tool Order screen. So it's a nice way to sort of start introducing a more consistent visual design to some of these menus. So if I wanted to release to students or including grade calculations, I could just click on the cog icon for an item, and a little drop-down would open where I could select the desired option. Now, as far as the actual reordering goes, I can drag items around within a category. I could also drag entire categories around, and even drag items between categories, which is really useful for taking groups of unassigned items and then quickly adding them to a category. So here, I'm dragging homework 5 from the unassigned category into the homework category. And when I drop it into that homework category, I'll get a nice indication that I've now applied it to a category that's worth X% of the final course grade. So we want to be able to provide some kind of feedback for these actions, letting you know that you're taking actions that would affect the weighting of your gradebook while still making them relatively unobtrusive. And that's the design for the reordering window. So we're really excited about this. And thank you again to David and the University of Dayton. This is going to be really useful. We think a very cool addition to the gradebook. Okay, so last point here. I just want to touch briefly on a couple of other enhancements that are coming down the pike. First, the gradebook team is making some table performance improvements, which will be particularly useful for very large course sites. Also, thanks to Notre Dame, we will have a couple of additional features in the system. So these include a new 4.0 scale option for final course grades, which will appear as an additional option next to the course grade. Custom final course grades can then be imported into the system via a spreadsheet, and the optional inclusion of students' university IDs as a separate column in the spreadsheet view or export. So we think these are going to be some really nice additions as well. Okay, so now with a little bit of time left, I guess we can get back to questions if anyone has any. Okay, so at Rutgers, we're having many problems with importing grades. They seem to be linked perhaps to duplicated Sakai sites. Mostly imported file not properly formatted. That's interesting. Yeah, you can reach out to us and let us, and maybe send along one of the spreadsheets that you're having trouble with. That's very strange that you're getting the not properly formatted, especially if there aren't any sort of strange characters or anything else in the spreadsheet file. But yeah, we can look into that for you. Okay, and I had an instructor with that issue needed to include the 0. Oh, interesting. So you had to have the points in there. You had to have 0 as the points. You definitely have the points in the brackets. Yeah, we'll take a look at that. That's interesting because are these being reused from a previous course somehow? Not actual points. Okay, thanks. So there needs to be points inside the brackets. Interesting. Yeah, I guess if there are empty brackets, maybe that's a bug that we would need to look into and address. Okay. Yeah, so please feel free to send that along and we can take a look at it. Great. Any other questions? Great, thank you. My question was, what if grades, which allows students to calculate their total grade by entering Ooh, that is a very interesting, I like that. Yeah, that's an interesting feature request. So we don't have that in the pipeline for the gradebook yet. But that's something that we can look into in the future because I think that's very useful to be able to sort of see, what kind of grade would I need to be getting to get an A in the class, for example. So I think that's a really useful feature, and we'll need to look into that for the future. Thank you. Can other people sort by column heading? It used to work in early September, but now kind of explodes. That's not good. You should absolutely be able to sort by column heading. Every column in the gradebook should allow you to be able to sort ascending or descending. So if you're encountering any errors with the sorting, please let us know. You can feel free to either send us an email or you could go into GitHub and create an issue for it, and we can take a look at it. Okay, great. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, we're very excited about the rubrics work. Unicon is doing some really great work, and I think that the rubrics are going to be very useful. Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, we're very excited about where the Gradebook is heading, and we really look forward to this. Unless there are any other questions, I'd just like to close out this presentation by thanking our project partners and developers. The success of the Gradebook project is very much the result of collaboration of like-minded institutions and providers coming together to meet the needs of faculty. So thanks again, and thanks to all of you for joining today. Great, glad to hear it. Thank you. All right, thanks everyone.